Well, good morning once again. Before I get started on today's sermon, I want to just say once again how grateful I am to have been called. And after 2.5 months on board, I'm even more excited about this ministry than I was before I started. So I'm excited about the work we are beginning to do together and all of the opportunities that are in front of us. And I'm just pleased and blessed that I have been given this opportunity to mission with you. So thanks again for all of your support and all your prayers, and keep those prayers coming, please, by all means. So anyway, the question today is, or it's not so much a question, it's a statement: don't gang up. And I don't know if you've ever participated in such an event, if you've been ganged up upon, or if you've participated as a member of a group who ganged up on someone else. Now, when I say ganged up, what I'm saying is it's an effort by a group of people to tear down the other. Not to build up the other, but to make fun of the other, to kind of verbally abuse the other, just to pile on. And when we gang up and we are seeing this type of activity going down, it's just basically destructive energy that's flowing from a group of people to the object of their disdain. Now, maybe you've done that or maybe you've not, and I want to make clear this is not to be confused, let's say, with an intervention where there's an organized effort by a group of loved ones gathered to lift up the individual who is suffering from some sort of an addiction, trying to help that person recognize that there is more to life. Sometimes the object of an intervention may feel like they're being ganged up on, but let's be clear, that's not what we're talking about today. One way I think we can see people ganging up on others in our world today is particularly through social media. If we look at Facebook, my goodness, there's ganging up activities going on every single day. And it's just dizzying, mind-boggling. The types of posts that are placed representing various points of view that tend to be pretty angry, pretty ugly, pretty accusatory. And whatever follows from that post is a gang up process of people piling up on each other. And what happens when this is going down is that we are in the process collectively as a nation of dividing ourselves. We're actually weakening ourselves. We are beginning to limit our worlds by destroying the other. And this has become part of the norm. As a matter of fact, families have been torn apart by this stuff. Communities have been hurt greatly. As a matter of fact, there have been studies on church attendance that suggest, since the onset of Facebook, and particularly with political rhetoric that's going every which way, there are many people who have decided to just stay away from church because they don't want to sit next to the person who's posting such ugly slop. Anyway, hopefully we're not doing that, but please let us recognize that when this kind of activity goes down, we are literally tearing the probable kingdom apart. Now, there's a theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr that I will occasionally mention. He was very, very big in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and he spent a lot of time studying compassion, or that part of shalom that focuses on sharing God's love with the person who is hurting. And what Niebuhr saw as he studied this power, this slipstream of shalom, was that shalom or compassion is strongest when it's in a more intimate situation, where it's a one-on-one, two-on-one situation where a person is engaged with the other. But compassion begins to quickly dissipate as a person enters a group. The larger the group, the less compassion. The more noise, the more distraction, and before we know it, that source of love can be greatly diminished. And so we have this sort of problem. Now Jesus today in Matthew's gospel, he's been piled upon, he's been ganged up on for the last few weeks. But this week, the Pharisees are really bringing in kind of the loaded gun, if you will. The Pharisees, who are a lay movement attempting to emulate the priests of the temple, these Pharisees are holding court now for several hours or days, trying to move Jesus off his mark. They've had no success, so now they bring in the Herodians. And the Herodians are connected to Herod, who is a puppet king and very much commingled with Rome, but some Judaism as well. And the Herodians, uniquely, not only Herodians, but a lot of Herodians were tax collectors. Now, there were tax collectors from other sects of Judaism as well, but the Herodians really were engaged. And you see, Rome never collected taxes. They never did that directly. What they did was hired contract labor to collect taxes. And you had to be wealthy, first of all, to be a tax collector. You had to have presence in the community or some sort of power. And then you paid a fee, and then you collected taxes. But the thing about the tax collectors and why they are so unpopular in the scriptures is that the tax collectors could charge anything they wanted. There was no control set on them. They could double the tax, triple the tax. They could do whatever they wanted. And they stripped a lot of wealth out of Galilee and Judea and Samaria and so on and so forth by putting unfair taxes on top of taxes. And this is what's happening, you see. Now, Rome didn't care. As long as Rome got what Rome wanted, you can get as rich as you want off this deal. We really don't care. And essentially what happens is the tax collectors they're making sure that those who are paying taxes have enough to survive, because they're just seen as, work, money. We got to keep you alive. We got to keep this thing going. So we have this going on, and the other thing is, if you decided to rebel and not pay your taxes, then the tax collector would call Rome, and then Rome would come and punish you. So the people were stuck, and now the Herodians, who really understand taxation, all these different things, they're brought in, even though the Pharisees are not particularly fond of them. And so the question to Jesus is it right to pay taxes? Well, here we are, and Jesus is faced with now a bit of a dilemma. He's trying to figure out how to answer that question, to stay engaged and stay in place in the temple. He recognizes that if he says one thing, the Pharisees are going to be very upset. If he says something else, the Herodians, and back and forth, and he's hardly going to compromise, but he's now working through, how do I answer this question and stay in this position, because now is not the time to quibble about such things. Well, I think we have a similar question for us in our lives. It's not so much about paying taxes. I think we understand, and certainly in our tradition, the two kingdoms of Luther and so on, it is right to pay taxes. We recognize that, and we recognize that also beyond the taxes that we pay for the public good, we have this opportunity to also give to the greater of God's kingdom, which also includes government, by the way. But we have this opportunity, and we're sorting these things out and trying to make sense of it all. And sometimes it's not so easy. But in any event, we go back to Jesus, and he's in the temple. He gets the question, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? And he says, well, give me a coin. He looks at the coin and he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Whose ever head is on this, give it to him. But also recognize it is right to give to God that which is God's. And what Jesus understands, and those who have followed his teachings and his ministry, they recognize what Jesus is saying is that everything is God's. And how do we replicate shalom? I believe that Jesus was speaking uniquely to the Herodians and to all the other tax collectors, recognizing that they had incredible power to improve the quality of life for those throughout Palestine, simply by not gouging so much. The wealth distribution would change radically if the corruption would come way down. And that was the challenge, I believe. Well, we're back to 2020, and we are in the midst of an interesting season of our lives. This COVID thing keeps going. We're now in the political season. There's lots of different things flying around, and we're trying to hold on to our understanding of peace, recognizing that we live in a world that has many different layers to it. We are tempted to possibly gang up on the other, but yet every time we have that opportunity or challenge in front of us, we also have the opportunity to not respond and to open our hearts and minds and our arms to a whole new reality. We do not have to be so divided. We are part of God's kingdom. Don't be misled. Come to the altar. You're being called every single day. Well, I remember years ago when I was the head of development for the University of Detroit. I often will get together and have dinner with three men who will remain nameless for now, but these three guys were World War II veterans, and they did see active duty. And they came back from World War II. And each one of these guys, they went to University of Detroit, and they got their degree. And each of these guys became profoundly successful in business. They were also remarkably, they were faith-filled guys. They were very generous to the church and to other charities. And I remember one night we were talking about the merits of giving gifts of stock or appreciated property, and how by doing that you could reduce taxes and this sort of thing. And each of the guys said, that's a good thing, and we're certainly going to do that. But they each also said, well, they said it collectively. And they said, you know, this country has given us a lot. And we are grateful that we're in the highest tax bracket. We are grateful to pay the taxes. We recognize that we can't do what we do without a lot of people. And they were proud of that. They were proud of their country. They were proud of their church. They were proud of their service. They were always thinking on this level, and that's not to say they weren't shrewd businessmen too, because they were. But I heard that, and those guys taught me so much. And I bring what they taught me all the time into my life. Just being with them and listening to them and recognizing here were guys that nearly lost their lives, and they made it, but they recognized they didn't do it alone. And they tried to help others best as they could. They weren't perfect, but man, to hear those voices that were ringing in my ears 30 years ago, and to remember those voices, and to pray that those voices are going to be heard even more and more as we move forward with our days. So, in short, let us resist the temptation to gang up on each other or the other, or whatever that means. Let us hear the still small voice of God saying, wait, listen, think. What do you hear? How are you connected? And always, always keep the other in prayer. Amen.